A Bullets YouTube channel.
Hurry up, now tell us why you're here.
Todd Marcus skipped qualifying! KC Corner will start at pole position with Lightning McQueen to his outside. Row 2 has Kurt Busch and Kevin Carvick, the car, second in points. Row 3 has Jeff Gorvette, two-time Piston Cup champion, and Cal Weathers, another Piston Cup champion. Row 4 has yet another Piston Cup champion, Tony Gasworth and Brick Yardley to his outside. Row 5 has Greg Beeple and Martin Carrix Jr. to his outside. Row 6 has Mark Carton and Denny Carlin, who's won a race this season, to his outside. Row 7 has The Rocket, Ryan Newcar, and Juan Papa Montoya to his outside. Row 8 has Bobby Swift and Jimmy Cables, who's overperforming expectations. Row 9 has Phil Tankson and Doug Throttleman, who seems to be inspired by Jeff Burnton. Row 10 has Carl Edwards and Joey Lagirno, the mean orange car. Row 11 has Elliot Draftler for some reason and Clint Bocart to his outside. Row 12 has Mike Yankee Jr. and Dale Earnhardt Jr., who hasn't won since 2008. Row 13 has Jamie McCarry and T.G. Castlenut. I wonder what they're going to do. Row 14 has Kyle Busch, the mean yellow car, and Moray Clutchburn. Row 15 has Max Carpus, and Jeff Burnton, the jumper. Row 16 has the two rivals, Samuel Serpentino and Bogart Hopscotch. Row 17 has David Rudikar and Matt Karzith, who's starting in the same row as his number. Row 18 has Brick Hicks and Brad Karslowski, who are underperforming expectations. Row 19 has J.J. Traley in his second start this season and A.J. Carmendinger. Row 20 has Reb Meeker and Rex Revler, who is back. Row 21 has Chip Gearings and David Raycar. And starting in 43rd is Dave Laney in his final season. These 11 cars, among many others, failed to qualify for this race. Now into the race. KC Corner would lead for the first lap of the race, but later in the first lap, Lightning McQueen would take the lead from him. He'd lead until lap 6, where Juan Papa Montoya would take the lead from him. He'd lead until lap 25, where Jimmy Cables would take the lead from him. He'd lead for 3 laps before Juan Papa Montoya would be back in the lead. He'd lead until lap 40, where Lightning McQueen would once again take the lead, leading for 6 more laps before Juan Papa Montoya would once again retake the lead. He'd lead for 12 more laps before the Rocket, Ryan Newcar, would take the lead from him. He'd only lead for 2 laps before Mark Carton would take the lead from him. But he'd lose the lead before the lap was out because Juan Papa Montoya would lead the field into the 60th lap and lead all the way until lap 67. Unfortunately, Max Carpus would be out on lap 65 because of an engine failure. And Martin Carrix Jr. would be out the next lap because he ran out of fuel. Lightning McQueen would take the lead after the restart and lead until lap 75, but Brick Hicks would be out on lap 68 because of a broken rear track bar mount. And Juan Papa Montoya would retake the lead on lap 75. 4 laps later, Lightning McQueen would be back in the lead. He'd lead until lap 84, where Juan Papa Montoya once again retakes the lead. He'd lead all the way until lap 102, where of course Lightning McQueen would retake the lead from him. 3 laps later, Cal Weathers would take the lead for the first time this race and lead for 4 laps before Lightning McQueen, as usual, is back in the lead. He'd lead until lap 110, where of course Juan Papa Montoya would take the lead from him. He'd lead for 11 laps before Lightning McQueen, of course, is back in the lead. And he'd lead for 11 more laps before Juan Papa Montoya, of course, is back in the lead. He'd lead until lap 143, where Lightning McQueen would retake the lead. 9 laps later, Juan Papa Montoya would once again retake the lead. He'd lead until lap 156, where of course Lightning McQueen is back in the lead. He'd lead for 3 more laps before Juan Papa Montoya would once again retake the lead. Leading until lap 162, where Lightning McQueen would take the lead once again, but lose it later in the lap to Juan Papa Montoya, of course. And he'd lead for 9 more laps before Kyle Busch would be 21st as of lap 171. Rex! Morai clutch burn! Morai! Lightning McQueen would take the lead after the restart and lead into lap 195, where Tony Gaswort would be 7th as of lap 176. Rex! Kyle Busch Tire! Hooray! And Jimmy Cables would take the lead from Lightning McQueen. But Lightning McQueen would be back in the lead on lap 197 and lead for one more lap before Juan Pablo Montoya would retake the lead once again, leading until lap 203, where of course Lightning McQueen retakes the lead. And he'd lead until lap 206, where Mike Yankee Jr. would take the lead from him. 2 laps later, Juan Pablo Montoya is back in the lead, and he'd lead until lap 221, where Lightning McQueen once again takes the lead. But he'll lose it 3 laps later to Juan Pablo Montoya, of course. And he'd lead for 2 more laps before, of course, Lightning McQueen would retake the lead from him. And he'd lead for 2 laps before Mark Carton would take the lead from him and lead for 2 laps for himself before Jeff Gorvette would take the lead for himself, leading for 5 laps before Juan Pablo Montoya would retake the lead. He'd lead for 4 more laps before Lightning McQueen would once again retake the lead, leading all the way until lap 241, where Juan Pablo Montoya would retake the lead. He'd lead for less than a lap though, because Jeff Gorvette would retake the lead for himself and lead all the way until lap 246, where Bobby Swift would take the lead for himself, leading for 3 laps before Juan Pablo Montoya would once again take the lead. He'd lead until lap 264, where Lightning McQueen would take the lead for himself on lap 265, but on lap 272, Juan Pablo Montoya would be back in the lead for 3 laps before Lightning McQueen once again retakes the lead. But on lap 277, Jeff Gorvette would take the lead for himself, and then the very next lap, on lap 278, Lightning McQueen is back in the lead until lap 286, where Denny Carlin would be 18th as of lap 286. Where Rex, Dave Laney, and Mike Yankee Jr. Why? But he puts himself 7 laps down. Juan Pablo Montoya would take the lead after the restart and lead until lap 288, where Lightning McQueen would once again retake the lead. He'd keep the lead until lap 307, but unfortunately, on lap 293, Reb Meeker would be out! Same with Brad Keselowski on lap 302 because of engine failures. Juan Pablo Montoya would retake the lead on lap 307 and lead for 5 laps before Lightning McQueen would retake the lead for himself once again. On lap 314, Kevin Harvick would take the lead for himself, but the very next lap, Juan Pablo Montoya would take the lead for himself once again. 3 laps later, Lightning McQueen is back in the lead, and he'd keep the lead for 30 laps before Phil Tankson would take the lead for himself, leading for 4 laps before Jeff Gorvette would once again retake the lead. But on lap 355, Lightning McQueen would take the lead for himself once again, leading all the way until lap 396. You would guess Lightning McQueen would cross the finish line in first, but Samuel Serpentino would be 25th as of lap 396, where he wrecks his rival Bogart Hopscotch. Of course he did that. But after the restart, Juan Pablo Montoya would take the lead and lead the final 3 laps to win the 2010 Leakless 400, with Kevin Harvick finishing 2nd, Lightning McQueen 3rd, Casey Corner 4th, and Phil Tankson rounding out the top 5. And Corey Turbowitz asks Jeff Burton why he didn't jump over any other cars, and Jeff Burton said that it was too dangerous. And here is the top 20 of the race, with Jeff Gorvette, Greg Beeple, Bobby Swift, Tony Gaswort, and Cal Weathers rounding out the top 10 of this race. And TG Castlenut is 12th. How? And AJ Carmeninger finishes 15th this race. And David Rudikar finishes 20th. Doug Throttleman would miss out on finishing in the top 20, but Joey Logierno, the mean orange car, would be the last car to finish on the lead lap, finishing 32nd. How is Denny Carlin still 7 laps down as of the end of the race? But that's how the race turned out. And onto the top 20 in points, where Lightning McQueen is still over 600 points ahead of second placed Kevin Karvik. And Martin Carrix Jr. is out of the top 20 because he finished 42nd this race. Casey Corner and Phil Tankson are now 19th and 20th respectively.
Remember to press the notifications button, which goes ring, ring, ring after you press it. And lightning strikes back, and that's as if you subscribed, of course. And thank you for watching this entire video.
The statuses. How is Lightning McQueen leading by that many points? Kurt Bushtire, don't say that word! Matt Karzif, how are you not leading laps? And Kyle Bushtire, don't wreck other cars! And also, this race essentially had two leaders, Lightning McQueen and Juan Pablo Montoya. These two cars just traded the lead for the entire race, with a few interruptions. Usually, multiple cars will lead many laps, but this race, only two cars led a bulk of the laps. The 26th race of the 2010 Piston Cup season will be coming out soon enough. Unfortunately, the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine is still going on. It's been over 6 months since this war has begun, this unjustified war that Vladimir Putin began. The Ukrainian people just want to live in peace and have freedom. But tyrant and bully Vladimir Putin will not let them live in peace. Luckily, the Ukrainian armed forces have liberated the city of Kherson. This happened between the uploading of last video and this video. Hopefully all land that is internationally recognized as a part of Ukraine will be returned to Ukrainian rule, which include the Crimean Peninsula, the Donbass, Zaporizhia Oblast, and the Kherson Oblast, which are shown as a part of Ukraine on this map. And Vladimir Putin, why would you declare an unjustified war on Ukraine? You already have enough of your own land, and you're even telling Russian men to fight in this war. And we at the hashtag K-Bullets YouTube channel will continue to stand with Ukraine and hope for the end of the war to be very soon. Slava Ukrainie! Героям слава! Нехай світі дарується Україні перемога!